My Side of the Story by Snow White. Why don't I look like a princess? The main reason I don't look like a princess is that I spend all my time scrubbing and sweeping the palace. I don't mind cleaning. As a matter of fact, I like it a lot. But the work is hard on my clothes. They're completely ragged. I haven't had a new dress since Father died years and years ago. Every time I ask the Queen, she says, "Don't be stupid, Snow White. You are still a growing girl." The Queen is my stepmother and my only parent now that Father is gone. She's very beautiful, but she has her moods, and I sometimes can't help feeling she doesn't like me very much. Whenever she sees me, she scowls and gives me more work to do. Last week, she made me scrub the dungeon stairway 3 times. She told me it was good exercise. And yesterday, when she saw me eating a bite of cake, she snatched it away. "Sweets," she snapped, "are unsuitable for a growing girl. Stick to your diet of bread crusts and gruel. Do you hear?" I did. This morning, as I drew water from the well, I found myself wondering if things would ever improve. Will the Queen like me better someday? I asked my friends, the palace doves. Will she give me a little time to myself and something nice to eat? They cocked their heads sweetly, as if considering the question. And will she let me have a new dress? I said with a sigh, I do hope so. My dearest wish. The doves cooed and fluttering around the bucket as I hauled it up. I looked at them, wondering what they were trying to tell me. Then I understood. Why not make a wish? I was at a wishing well, after all. So I stood there with my eyes closed and my fingers crossed, and I wished for the love of a kind, handsome prince, because that's what I really wanted, even more than tasty food and a new dress, though I wished for them too, just in case. Then I opened my eyes. The most wonderful thing happened. The handsomest young man I had ever seen was standing beside me at the well. He wore garments of silk and boots of softest leather. His hands and face were extremely clean. His shining brown locks were freshly washed and groomed. He looked like a prince, a very clean one. My heart raced. "Oh," I exclaimed. Could it be that my dearest, most secret wish had truly been granted? "Hello," he said. "Did I frighten you?" I wanted to say no, but suddenly I was overwhelmed with shyness and couldn't speak a word. Instead, I ran into the palace. "Don't go," he cried out with such longing that I hurried onto a balcony to wave to him. When one of the doves fluttered to my shoulder, I did something very bold. I kissed the dove and sent it down to the prince. At this he called, "I will never forget you." Then I saw the Queen. She stood at her tower window watching us, and something, perhaps the way her face was twisted into a grotesque snarl, told me she was not pleased at all. The Huntsman Who Told a Lie. Beautiful as she was, the Queen also could be a teensy bit moody. Had I angered her? Would she punish me with some horrible new task, like sweeping out the dungeon or polishing those terribly ugly gargoyles? No, she would not. Instead, the Queen sent word that I was to spend the day picking wildflowers with Brad the huntsman. I was so relieved. She even gave me a new dress and matching cape to wear. It was almost too good to be true. Putting down my scrub brush, I followed Brad into the forest, and before long I was happily gathering violets and field daisies. "Aren't these beautiful?" I said, hearing Brad approach. "They're for the Queen." "Have you found any pretty flowers, Brad?" Brad said nothing. I looked up and found him standing over me with a dagger in his hand. "Brad, I explained. You don't need a dagger to pick wildflowers. He fell to his knees. I can't do it, he said with tears in his eyes. I just can't. That's all right, I said. Don't cry. I'll give you some of mine. Forget the flowers, he said. The queen commanded me to kill you, and I can't. But she would never do such a thing, I protested. Stop fibbing, Brad, or I might have to scold you. I'm not fibbing, Princess, he insisted. The queen envies your beauty. She wants you dead. You must run away. Run and hide, he implored between sobs. I couldn't bear to see Brad in tears, so I gave in. All right, I said. I'll find a place to hide, I promise. But please stop crying. Thank you, Princess, said Brad, brightening a little. Then, sniffling and wiping his eyes, he headed back to the palace. Fright. As night fell, I began to wonder if I had made the right decision. The dark forest came alive in the most unsettling way. The wind moaned, leaves rustled. I heard thuds, hoots, howls, squeaks, and cries. I'm surrounded, I thought, shivering. But by what? I tried to make my way through the trees, tripping and stumbling. Branches grazed my arms. Thorns scratched my feet. Then something caught my dress. Was it a hand? A claw? I pulled away in terror. I heard a dreadful ripping sound. Oh no, I cried. Not my dress. It's brand new. It's the only thing I have. Sobbing, I fell down into a swoon. The handsome prince with the shining hair leaned over me. I love you, Snow White, he whispered, and his lips brushed my hand. I love you too, I replied. He kissed my hand again, but now for some reason his nose was wet. Then I woke up. A little gray rabbit was nuzzling my hand. A fawn was leaning over me, ears pricked up. Birds watched from the trees, their eyes bright with concern. A squirrel tapped at my head with an acorn. Oh my goodness, I cried, remembering where I was and all that had happened. I'm all alone. I have no home. The queen wants to kill me, and my dress is in shreds. What am I going to do? 3 little bluebirds perched on a branch began to sing. A chipmunk pranced up to me and squeaked. A rabbit wiggled its nose. The fawn flicked its tail playfully. You're telling me not to worry, aren't you? I asked. They nodded. Suddenly, I was ashamed of myself for being so fearful. Everything was going to be all right, especially if I could find a place to stay. Do you know of any cottages for rent? I asked. They shook their little heads. Oh, I said, trying not to sound too disappointed. Well, I'm sure I'll find something. But where, I wondered. Then, as if answering my question, the bluebirds flew down, took hold of my tattered skirt, and began leading me through the forest. Dirt. Oh, how adorable, I cried. Nestled in the trees ahead of us, just beyond a rushing brook, was the dearest little cottage I had ever seen. I couldn't wait to find out who lived there, so I hurried across the bridge and knocked at the door. Hello, I called. May I come in? Hearing no answer, I peered through the windows, which were so dusty I had to rub at them with my already tattered skirt. It was dark inside. I tried the door. It was unlocked. I tiptoed in, followed by a crowd of animals and birds. At first, all I could see was some tiny chairs, 7 of them. Could 7 children be living here? I wondered. How strange. I looked around a little more and saw a sink and a fireplace with a kettle hanging in it. Then, as my eyes became accustomed to the gloom, I received a hideous shock. The sink was full of dirty dishes. Cobwebs hung from every corner, and the floor was covered with dust. The place was filthy. We've got to clean this cottage, I announced to my companions. How can those poor children live like this? So we all got busy, scrubbing and sweeping and polishing. The birds and animals were so helpful, dusting furniture with their tails, pulling down cobwebs with their beaks, washing dishes with their little paws, that everything was sparkling in no time. I wish you'd been with me at the palace, I told them when the last dish was put away. You are such good workers. I looked around with satisfaction. What had once been a horrible mess was now wonderfully clean and tidy. Let's take a short break, I continued, and then we'll head upstairs. I'm ashamed to say that when we did go upstairs, the sight of 7 dear little beds lined up in a row made me forget all my good intentions. Cleaning would have to wait, I decided. It was time for a rest. Yawning, I read the names that were carved into the footboards. Doc, Sleepy, Sneezy, Happy, Dopey, Bashful, and Grumpy. What odd names for children, I mused. There were squeaks and twitters of agreement. Then all of us, chipmunks, squirrels, fawns, raccoons, rabbits, and bluebirds, settled down for a nice long nap. A fine how do you do? The handsome prince took my hand and kissed it. His fingernails were so clean. I love you, Snow White, he whispered. I love you too, I said. He smiled, revealing gleaming white teeth. Then he said something, but a noise, almost like a very loud whispering, drowned out his voice. What did you say? I asked. His lips moved again. I couldn't hear a word. Please speak up, I shouted. I can't hear you. And then I awoke. The 7 little children were peering at me over the foot of the beds. They were very strange children indeed. They had beards, and they were filthy. I couldn't help it. I screamed. I fought the urge to jump out of bed and scrub each and every one of them with a stiff brush. Instead, I managed to say, how do you do? How do you do what? Snapped one of them. I took a closer look. He wasn't a dirty bearded child. He was a dwarf. There were 7 of them. He's awfully grumpy, I thought, and then I realized he was grumpy. It didn't take long to match the others to their names. The one with the big grin was Happy. The one who kept yawning was Sleepy. The one with the spectacles was Doc. The one who sneezed so hard that the curtains flapped was Sneezy. The one who blushed when I looked at him was Bashful. And the one with big blue eyes was Dopey. He looked, well, kind of dopey. Grumpy glared at me. We know who we are, he said. Who are you? And what are you doing here? I introduced myself, and then I told them about picking wildflowers with Brad the huntsman. He said my stepmother, the queen, wants to kill me. But I just can't believe it. I don't like to say this, I said, leaning forward, but I think Brad was fibbing. Maybe not, said Doc. The queen is lawful. I mean awful. She's bad, said Happy. She's an old witch, full of black magic, said Grumpy to the 6 other little men. And if she finds her here, he added, pointing at me, we're done for. But she'll never find me here, I protested. And if you let me stay, I'll keep your house very, very clean. They backed away as one. I could see this was the wrong argument, so I tried again. I'll cook for you. I'll give you good, healthy food, like bread and gruel. Bread and gruel? Echoed Happy. He beckoned to the others, and they went into a huddle. After a long whispered discussion, Doc stepped forward. What about apple dumplings? He asked. Will you make those? As many as you like, I promised. They cheered, even Grumpy, and we all hurried downstairs. There's only one condition, I told them when we reached the kitchen. Before you sit down at the table, you have to wash. Wash? Sleepy's eyes flew open. Happy's smile disappeared. The other dwarfs looked dismayed too. We did wash, they said. When? Last week? Last month? Last year? Recently? I saw that I was going to have to be very firm with them. March straight outside and wash, or you won't get anything to eat, not even bread and gruel. They marched. The strange old lady and her very shiny apple. Our meal of apple dumplings, plum pudding, and gooseberry pies would have horrified the queen, for it wasn't the least bit wholesome, but it was a lot tastier than bread and gruel, and it gave us all a chance to get acquainted. The dwarfs told me about their work down in the diamond mines. I told them about life at the palace and my wish at the well. And it did come true, I said. It brought me a handsome prince, for a few minutes anyway. I sighed, suddenly overcome with yearning. How I hoped I would see the prince again for more than a few minutes. Then the clock began to strike. It's bedtime, I cried. Go right upstairs, all of you. You can have our beds, offered Doc. We'll sleep down here. Oh, I couldn't do that, I said, but they insisted. Once I saw that the dear little men were perfectly comfortable sleeping in the sink, in cupboards, on the floor, and in cooking vats, I gave in. I climbed the stairs, and before I fell asleep, I said a silent thanks for my 7 adorable new friends. Then I slept. The next morning, as the dwarfs got ready for work, they warned me to be careful while they were down in the mines. The queen's a sly one, said Doc, so beware of strangers. Oh, don't worry about me, I said, touched by their concern. I'll be just fine. Nothing could possibly go wrong on such a beautiful day, I thought, as I kissed them each goodbye on the forehead. It was sunny and bright, perfect for airing out the cottage and doing some serious housework. I could hardly wait to pick up a broom. With the help of the birds and the animals who came rushing into the cottage as soon as the dwarfs were gone, I scrubbed and swept and dusted, and then I scrubbed some more. I can hardly believe we cleaned this place yesterday, I said to the birds. Can you? They couldn't either. At last, everything was sparkling and tidy, and it was time to start baking. Tonight, I had decided we would have fruit pies for dessert. I began to roll out the crust. Peach or cherry, I mused, rhubarb or apple. Before I could make up my mind, a strange old woman appeared at the door. Making pies? She asked. She had a huge wart on her nose, which was not the slightest bit attractive. I tried very hard not to stare at it. Yes, I am, I said, making my decision, gooseberry pies. Why not use some of these? She asked, showing me the apples in her basket. They're delicious. Taste one. Go on, have a bite. The apple she offered looked lovely, and it was extremely clean. But as I reached for it, the oddest thing happened. The birds, the same sweet little birds who had been helping me with the housework, flew at the old woman as if they were attacking her. She dropped the apple with a croak, and before I could stop her, she was down on her hands and knees searching for it. At last, after many ear-splitting cries of woe, she found it. She wiped it clean as carefully as if it were a precious jewel. I felt very sorry for the poor old thing. The threat of losing one of her apples had shaken her so. I helped her up, and because she was none too steady on her feet, I invited her into the cottage. Her spirits improved quickly once we were inside, and again she offered me the apple. I'll tell you a secret, she said, holding it just beyond my reach. This is no ordinary apple. It's a magic wishing apple. One bite and all your dreams will come true. A magic wishing apple? Does it work like a wishing well? I asked hopefully. Much better, she assured me. There's no comparison. Now go on, she urged, placing the apple in my hand. Make your wish and take a nice big bite. And so I did. My dearest wish, part 2. The handsome prince leaned over and kissed me. His lips were as soft as a dove's wing. I opened my eyes, and there he was, kneeling at my side. I must be dreaming, I thought, and then I wondered, what am I doing in a glass coffin? But I didn't have time to find out, because the next thing I knew, the prince took my hand, and his touch made my heart thump like a clean sheet flapping in the wind. I stood, we embraced. He told me that he loved me. I told him that I loved him. The birds sang, the dwarfs cheered, wiping tears from their grimy little faces as I bade them farewell. Then I rode away with my handsome prince, waving goodbye to the sweet little dwarfs and those nice, clean animals. We got married, and those dwarfs gave us the nicest wedding gift ever. They do work in a diamond mine, you know. And I got to wear a brand new dress, a big white one. That was the best part of all. The prince and I lived happily ever after, and that's all thanks to an old woman with a huge yucky wart and the apple. I never saw her again, but I'd love to thank her. That wishing apple really did work. The end.